we start in this red circle called pre-contemplation, which is usually we have no intention of changing our behavior. And this can be applied to many different aspects of life. So maybe you're wanting to change behavior in one aspect, but there might be other aspects you don't have any intention of changing. So in whatever that aspect is, that's in pre-contemplation. Sometimes people are in pre-contemplation before they realize that they have a health problem they need to address, for example. And so they're not even thinking about making changes. But say they go to the doctor and they get some labs that come back, and the labs show that they have their risk for problems. So that might move them into the orange circle here of contemplation, where they're aware that there's a problem. Maybe the lab test said that their cholesterol was 350. So, okay, that's a problem, but I'm not really ready to change anything yet. So that's this orange circle contemplation, where you become aware that there's a problem. The next stage is preparation, where you actually say, you know, I think I'm going to do something about it. But you haven't actually done anything different yet. This is just where you're saying, okay, I'm going to sign up for that series of phone calls with Lucia, or I'm going to read this book, or I'm going to do something to actually help me move in the direction that I need to move. The next one is this green one at the bottom, which is action, which is active modification of behavior. All of you that have been on this call with me for the last few weeks are in this stage in the areas that we're working on, because you're actually taking action. You're doing something different. Now, the next stage is what you're looking at in terms of your challenges going forward for many of you, which would be maintenance. That is sustaining the change as your new behavior replaces your old behavior. And this has to do with actually making new habits, doing something new long enough that it becomes more automatic or more natural. And so most of you are still in this green circle for the things that we've been working on over the last few weeks. But going forward, you're going to be looking at wanting to move into the blue circle, where you're maintaining that change in behavior. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's also important to realize that part of those recognized stages of change is that at some point, we often fall back into an old pattern of behavior. We call that a relapse, don't we? And that might be where, okay, we had been eating between meals for 3 weeks, and then we did. Okay, we call that a relapse. Now, sometimes when people have a relapse, they get really discouraged, and they say, oh, well, I'm right back here in the red square. I haven't actually made any progress. That's really not true, because the fact that you've been through these other steps means that when you hit this relapse, even if you're into an old behavior, you aren't at the same place you were before you started. And as you'll notice in this kind of center section, it says that the stages of change are kind of like an upward spiral. Every time we have a relapse, we learn from it and we come up another level. Okay, so we might relapse. We'll say, okay, what am I going to do? So sometimes from relapse, we go to, oh, there's a problem. Like, what was the problem? Why did I relapse? And then you might think about, what do I need to do to fix that problem? And then you'll take action on it. And so this action going around this time might be different from what it was the first time when you were implementing that new behavior, because now you're addressing maybe a trigger to avoid a relapse. And you go into maintenance mode with that, and you may or you may not relapse. And it really doesn't matter if you relapse or not. The point is that if you do, what you want to do is you want to look at the stages of change and go, okay, how do I grow from this? What can I learn from this particular relapse? And every time we relapse, we'll usually learn something different about ourselves, about our triggers, about our way of coping. There's lots of learning that can happen with relapses. So I just wanted to share this so that if you get to this stage of change, you don't get discouraged and you don't feel like, well, it was all for nothing. I'm just going to throw in the towel and give up. Because actually, as we grow, we learn new ways of doing things, new ways of being more successful in the behaviors that help us move towards our goals, and so on. So let's keep this an upward spiral in our life instead of saying, oh, I got to relapse, I'm back to zero, because you're not. So if you get to this relapse point, you fall back into an old pattern of behavior, you are not at the same point you were before you started this process. You have a lot more learning under your belt. You've had experiences. You've learned how to deal with certain aspects of this. You know, for example, I'm thinking of, you know, someone who's trying to get off coffee. Okay, if you relapse, say you set your stop date, and so you're not drinking anymore, and then, you know, maybe a couple of weeks go by, or maybe it's just a few days, it doesn't really matter. And somebody like just puts a cup in your hand and you drink it and you go, what did I just do? I don't drink coffee anymore. Okay. Just remember these stages of change and go, okay, this is simply an opportunity for me to learn going forward. How am I going to deal with this so this doesn't happen again? And you can go right back to whatever your new behavior is. So a relapse is never a reason to give up, and it's never a reason to assume that, oh, I haven't learned anything, or I'm in the same place I was before, because that doesn't need to be true. It can actually be a learning process and another stepping stone in your growth moving forward.